Hello everybody, Ben Woodruff here with another falconry video. Today's video I'm going to be talking about Eurasian hobbies. Hobbies are a small species of falcon, but they're also a larger clade. The hobby falcons, there's a large number of them, different types of hobbies and sister lineages. I made a video covering all of these species and that is linked down below. The video you're about to see is clipped from that longer video. So this video, again, is just going to be talking about the Eurasian hobby. And again, check out down below if you want to see a link to the whole long video with all the related species. The Eurasian hobby is, in my mind, because it's the first hobby that I ever learned about, is kind of the quintessential hobby. This is a bird that lives and breeds throughout Europe and Asia. It's got a very wide range. And as far as its coloration, as a young bird, it's kind of streaked, but as an adult, there's red flanks, these lower red flanks, and there's deep, thick streaks on top. And the bird itself has a head almost kind of like a peregrine falcon, has sort of a malar stripe, and it's an odd-looking bird. It has a dumpy face, and when I say that, I mean the bird itself looks like it ran into a wall and the beak went and kind of got smushed in. It's kind of a stumpy face. Not only that, the eyes themselves are kind of turned upright. Any member of the hobby lineage, watch for that. Once you know it, you can't unsee it. Any hobby or hobby-related species, you'll see the head is different. And let's compare it. If you compare this to a peregrine falcon, so a peregrine falcon and a hobby kind of, from the side view, sort of kind of look the same, but when you see from the front, when you see those eyes turned up, the head is more turned up, the head is smushed down, and the beak is smushed in. They all have that kind of strange, dumpy face, and I'm going to point that out throughout this video. Even though hobbies, Eurasian hobbies, even though they live in Europe and Asia, they winter in Africa. So this is a long-range migrant bird. They weigh between about 175 grams to 285 grams. So this is, kind of, again, in the range of a merlin. But they're different than a merlin. A merlin is robust. It's thick-chested and it has power. A merlin is the perfect bird for size because they're just small enough that they're buoyant, but they're big enough and burly enough to have huge power for long distance powered chases. A merlin is just like a little gyrfalcon. But not Eurasian hobbies. Eurasian hobbies have power, but they're way more buoyant and nimble and flighty, and they're able to do aerial acrobatics that other birds can't do. They have oversized primaries. So their primary wing feathers, they're longer than one would expect if you're comparing to like a gyrfalcon or a peregrine falcon or even a kestrel. They have these overly long, kind of swift-like primary feathers. And they use these in odd ways, in ways that are a bit more like how swifts and swallows fly and how they move. Now their prey, they hunt a lot of birds, and they hunt a lot of insects and a lot of dragonflies and butterflies, things like that. And they'll catch these on the wing. They'll catch them in the air. They don't like to target prey on the ground. They like to be on the move and catch things, and they will even sometimes eat some of these birds in the air. Now, it is interesting that, again, when I was first reading about these birds back in the day, what I read made it seem like they were worthless for falconry. But I've since done more digging and have found that yes, these birds were in fact used as falconry birds. They were used to hunt larks, which is interesting because that's kind of the high mark. There's a bird called a skylark that merlins were used in medieval times to hunt. It's a very athletic, powerful, fast, tiny little bird, and merlins were great at it. Apparently, Eurasian hobbies were also used in medieval times for this same quarry, which is very impressive. But again, there's just how do you compare? A Merlin compared to a hobby. A hobby is flighty and buoyant and woo, and a Merlin's like no. There's more power. If you saw a Merlin just on its own, you might think, okay, yeah, they're buoyant. Nah. Not compared to a hobby. Hobbies have a buoyancy and a nimbleness and an agility that's kind of unparalleled. The juveniles, again, they look like a little bit like a young peregrine falcon. They're kind of streaked, and even if you compare them, if you compare first year hobby to a first year peregrine, you might say, wow, these almost look like the same bird, just one's much bigger. But again, as adults, they get these deep red flanks, and they're sort of white and black on top and flanks on the bottom. Now remember that patterning, because once you see, again, this is a good starting point, because I want you to see these patterns in all the other birds we're going to talk about after this. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So remember, first year, kind of streaky, but then as an adult, red flanks and maybe kind of red rump feathers and red underneath the vent feathers, and kind of some deep barring here, and a very defined mallard stripe here. Watch for this, because you're going to see it on all the other birds that we're going to talk about in this video. But and again, if you're watching this video and you're wondering what is he talking about, this is just the hobby video, because I'm going to split this video up into other videos. So I will have a link to this to other birds that I'm going to mention in the other videos. So be watching for it. But anyways, Eurasian hobbies, kind of the basic quintessential starting point for this video, and really kind of an odd and amazing bird, not as used as much in falconry as Merlins, or even as kestrels for that matter. But they're really odd. Again, they're so, if you just look at these birds by their colors or something, you're gonna miss it. There's kestrels, there's hobbies, and there's Merlins. All three of these have cousins of different types. All three of these birds, they're very different from each other in how they are. So a kestrel hunts, and I'm talking Eurasian kestrels here, and all the old world kestrels are not as closely related to. Here we have American kestrels, and they're smaller and a bit different. But a Eurasian kestrel and any other old world kestrel, they're big, they're hefty in size, but they hunt like a red-tailed hawk. They can hover. They can be buoyant, they can hover in one place, and they can pursue, but basically they want to sit around and they want to dive down and catch a mouse or a vole or something like that. They will hunt birds, but that's not really what they're built to do. Merlins are built to just no, million miles an hour chase prey up to the size of a pigeon. It's just pretty impressive. While really it's kind of in between with a hobby. A hobby is a buoyant falcon that can kind of just move and cut and tack and dive and chase, but it's not about power, it's about agility. So Merlins are very agile, kestrels are not very agile, hobbies are extremely agile, they're fast, but the speed is more about agility. The speed is not so much about power. So that's Eurasian hobbies. Beautiful birds, amazing birds, and one that I never thought much of, but truly a unique part of history. And again, one of these long-distance migrants. So I think they're very, very cool birds. Well, I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about the Eurasian hobby. It's a really fascinating species, a beautiful species, and one with a rich history, including in falconry. And I think it's kind of the quintessential hobby. Of all the hobbies in the world and hobby-related species, I think the Eurasian hobby is kind of the hallmark standard. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, if you could hit subscribe, I very much appreciate it. It helps me keep this channel up and going. And as always, happy hawking.